It's already 5 p.m. I know you all want to go home now, so I have to make this very, very quick. So about a month ago, I was in the headquarters of Meta in Facebook, and I was introduced to the metaverse by the guys from Meta. And I was so amused, more so because I was watching one of my bosses in his VR glasses, and he's holding or reaching out for that virtual ball or virtual toy, whatever he's looking at. And the guys from Meta were like, welcome to Web 3.0. So, Web 3.0, how do we get here? So, years ago, in the not so distant past, we all used to go to the cyber cafes just to go to the internet, right? And then in the 90s, Steve Jobs introduced the first iPhone, and right there and then, we suddenly had the power of, of surfing the internet right from the palm of our hands. And so the development of the internet was more catered on producing apps for mobile applications and the development of social networks. And then we realized that we need to put up content and data to the users wherever they are. So content delivery networks became the thing, and people decided that we need to push more data to the cloud in order to, to provide the data to the user wherever they may be in the fastest time possible. So actually, as right now, the Philippine society, we're just about to reap the fruits of Web 2.0, but now we're seeing the blossoming of the next stage of the internet, which is Web 3.0. Well, what best describes Web 3.0 would be intelligence. And it's not just the intelligence between humans and website, but more on the interaction between software and software. Okay? So, because of this, Web 3.0 is more on decentralizing everything. And because everything is decentralized, we begin to develop trust without the intermediaries or the trusted third parties. In cryptography, we always talk about the TTPs or the trusted third party, the unknown third party that we interact with every time we surf the internet. So because we are doing away with the intermediaries, societies become more efficient. Imagine a society where there are no more rent-seeking third parties. And organizations become more resilient because they now have their networks that are adaptive. Okay? And data sharing is becoming more agile, and we have more privacy and security assurance. And as I've said, we're no more dependent on platforms. But there will always be challenges because of new technology. What? The first thing we need would be more computing power. So we will have to upgrade our mobile devices, we'll have to upgrade our laptops, computers, and systems. Next would be the complexity of the user experience. I remember teaching my father how to use Facebook. Diba? We all have that experience. At first, it would be difficult, but we would slowly be adapting. Okay? And it would be very, very difficult to regulate. Coming from the government, it has always been our experience of trying to regulate the internet or the people who are surfing the internet. And it's difficult now. How much more in Web 3.0 where everything is decentralized? Next would be the slow adaptation. It would take 10 years. Okay? I think it would take 10 years before we fully adapt to Web 3.0. Just imagine now, we're still in the process of consuming and reaping the fruits of Web 2.0, and we haven't we haven't gotten the fruits of digital transformation yet. Next is the ease of access to data. It's a double-edged sword, actually, because Web 3.0 is so vast. People can get their data anywhere, everywhere. At the same time, hackers may be also able to access our data. Okay, and upgrades would be needed because we need more power. Systems would need to be upgraded. And lastly, it's not really environmentally, how do you say that? It's not great news for environmentalists. Do you know how much power we need just to enable the Bitcoin mining economy? Environmentalists are saying that it actually takes it takes about the size of a small country just to power Bitcoin mining. So imagine that, how much power we're putting up just to, it's nothing but just a consensus protocol, right? We're not lighting up event areas. We're just mining. Okay. So what are the risks? Well, I could just stress this enough. More spam. Okay. So the Web 3.0 is so vast. We get more attack vectors. We get more channels for sending spam, and we get more of that. And then, of course, social engineering would be more sophisticated. Now, we could always say that blockchain technology is tamper-proof, right? But being tamper-proof doesn't mean that it's immune from compromise. Okay? Next would be identity risks. There are new protocols for self-sovereign identity governance, and it would be used in Web 3.0 to give us a series of credentials in our global transactions. And because there's decentralized data governance and identity governance, we'd be seeing a lot of identity risks. And there would always be data risk. It's not just the risk in terms of the authenticity of data, but also in the modification and the availability of data. And because of that, there's just so many unknowns. I really love this quote from Donald Rumsfeld. I love the wisdom of Donald Rumsfeld. He was the U.S. Secretary of Defense when I was born, and he was still the U.S. Secretary of Defense when I graduated from the academy. He's like the American advanced version of JPE. If you know JPE, for our foreign friends, that's Juan Ponce Enrile. So it's like the American version of that. So he said, there's just a lot of unknowns. The things that we do not know, that we don't know. Okay? Coming from the military, I used to work with military intelligence. Now, some of you might be laughing because you say military intelligence is like an oxymoron. Mom Charmaine here is laughing. Coming from the military, you can't use the words military and intelligence in the same sentence. But I've got news for you. Me and Miss Charmaine, we both came from the Army, not from the Marines, so we're immune from that. So going back to what Donald Rumsfeld said, as an intelligence professional, my mission would always be to reduce the uncertainty. to ascertain the uncertain. So in our jobs in the cybersecurity field, we always go back to the intelligence cycle, from planning and direction of intelligence to collection, processing, analysis and production, and dissemination and feedback. It's a loop. It goes round and round. The more questions you ask and the more answers to those questions, you will learn a lot more questions and you will be needing more answers. So it goes around in cycle. It doesn't stop. It doesn't end when you have already answered your questions. So if we look into these processes and we look at how we should operate in Web 3.0, it's almost like the same with just a few modifications. Now, in the military decision-making process, we always ask about the CCIRs, or the Commander's Critical Information Requirements, or the essential elements of information. These are the information that's needed by military commanders in order to make decisions in the battlefield. Just like the same in the cybersecurity field, we need this information in order to provide data-driven support systems to our business leaders. Okay, they've got questions and they need answers. So we identify those questions. Next, we identify what needs to be accessed. In Web 2.0, this would have been easy. We just identify what platforms we need to access. So in my work, we try to identify what do we need to access. Which is it a Facebook group? Is it a Telegram chat channel? Is it a Discord channel that we need to access? But in Web 3.0, we'll be doing away with the platforms. So it would be different. Next, we need to assess the technical capabilities of the targets. Are we against a group of script kiddies? Or are we against a state-sponsored advanced persistent threat, or a military cyber unit? Because if we look at the technical capabilities of our targets, we would be deciding on the operational security procedures that we do in the conduct of our cyber investigations. Next, lastly, we should determine the end goals. What does our business leaders want to accomplish? What are the objectives? That way, we would be thinking just like how our commander or our business leaders think, or how they work. Because in the course of the intelligence cycle, as we work and we answer the questions that were originally asked, we would be discovering more questions, and we would have to ask ourselves, what would be the EEIs or the CCIRs of our business leaders? So after the planning, we go to collection. During the collection phase, you need to be very, very careful. So as I've said, there would be a lot of risk in terms of identity. The first thing that you will to learn in the cyber threat intelligence collection is you have to do away with your personal identity, with your personal accounts. You don't use your personal account to surf and investigate on LinkedIn or on Facebook. Why? You just might accidentally hit the like button, and the target would say, oh, this guy is looking at my profile. So use your avatars. Then collect first. Collect as much data as possible. Do not go into the trap of collecting and then right there and then you analyze that data. You would be consuming so much time if you do that. Just collect and collect the data. Analysis will come later. Next, you should start broad and narrow as needed. So when I investigate hashtags, it would be it would be more logical to include everything and include all the forms of that hashtag. Okay? You might be using a different spelling or a different convention. Why? It's much better if you sift through the false positives rather than missing out data from the result of having false negatives. Okay? Then, lastly, you document your pivots. During the course of cyber investigations, I usually uh, I usually go through one identity and then I pivot to another identity. Sometimes sometimes our bosses would ask, how come that this identity is related to this identity? You must be able to document when you discovered the evidence that this identity is linked to another identity. So document those pivots. Then we go to processing. Transcribe, translate, and decode. So looking at so much data, it would be very, very useless if your analysts will not be able to read, understand, and search through those data. Imagine having 6 terabytes of videos. You cannot let your analysts look through those videos, all 6 terabytes of it. It's much better if those videos have already been transcribed and then your analyst would just have to search for keywords, search for names, search for anything, okay? Then we consolidate and reduce. So if we look at the intelligence analysis process, we usually consolidate all the data and then do a deduction method. Reduce, reduce until you have only what is relevant data left. Okay? But reducing doesn't mean that you're going to throw away your raw intel. You're still going to retain it and keep it. Why? Because your analyst might one day, someday, he may want to go back to your raw data and look through it. Okay? Then it is a good practice to generate the timeline. I know there are a lot of tools right here. They're outside. They have a booth here. They provide beautiful timelines of data. So it's much better if you look at the timelines and see how these data interact with each other, not just with the links, but also with the time elements. Lastly, leverage on the spreadsheets. You know, I know a lot of you don't like using Excel or CSVs, but I love using it because they're much easier to integrate into Maltigo and other like I2 Analyst. It's much easier to use them. And you could create graphs coming from those spreadsheets. Okay. Then we go to analysis and production. So what do we do at this part? We answer the original questions that we asked during the planning stage. After answering those original questions, we find out that we still have more unknowns. Okay. We will discover another set of known unknowns. The previous unknown unknowns, they now become apparent. They now become known unknowns. And they will become your current intelligence gaps. So, identify them. Next is we need to reduce confirmation bias. Confirmation bias happens when an analyst is looking or investigating a criminal, and sometimes, he just there's just some biases happening from his analysis. It's a good idea to have two sets of data. One that supports your theory, and another set of data that doesn't or disproves your theory. And then you sift through those data just to reduce that confirmation bias. Then you evaluate for relevance, bias, and reliability. In the military, we evaluate information according to source. So we have sometimes we would ask among our colleagues, is that A1U intelligence? Is that B2Y or something like that? Okay. So evaluate for relevance. Lastly, use visuals to convey high-level information. I love maps. I love putting data on maps. I'm also into geospatial intelligence. I use ArcGIS. I love putting up visuals in order to convey information to high-level officials. They don't have time to sift through all your data. They don't have time to read all 20 pages of your report. But it's a better idea to use visuals to convey those 20-page report into one page. Okay. Lastly, we go to dissemination and feedback. In cyber threat intelligence, we usually convey information into different formats. The most widely used, it would be the STIX format, or the Structured Threat Intelligence Expression. STIX is a standard that was developed by the MITRE Corporation and the Oasis project. So it's machine readable, so you can actually you can configure your firewalls, configure your network security products to consume these STIX elements. Okay. Then there's MIST, or the malware information sharing platform. Okay. And then there would be custom schemas. In terms of delivery, we have taxi. Parang taxi din, you know. It's like a delivery vehicle. It's trusted, automated exchange of information and intelligence. It's related to the STIX format. It's developed by MITRE Corporation and the Oasis project. And you can configure your network security devices to consume STIXs through the use of taxi. Okay. Then you can also use the spreadsheets, CSVs, JSON, and text files, and of course APIs. And then there are also custom intelligence feeds. Now, feedback, on the other hand, should be collaborative. Okay. There should be an interaction between the producer of intelligence and the consumer of intelligence. So we assess the cyber threat intelligence. There are two general assessment methods. One is the measure of performance, which is a quantitative assessment of how much threat intelligence is produced. And then there's measure of effectiveness, which is more of a qualitative assessment of how much intelligence is actually usable. Okay. So in conclusion, conducting cyber threat intelligence in Web 3.0 is very, very challenging. So that's why collaboration is very much essential to improve CTI. Now, the speaker before me have mentioned the need for exchange of information. So I have long been advocating for the establishment of information sharing and Analysis Centers, or ISACs. So in the US, for example, they've got financial ISACs for the financial community. So they exchange and collaborate on information. Then we need new tools and new approaches. New technology, new platform, new tools, and new approaches. Then strategic, operational, and tactical CTI should continually evolve. As the platform evolves, as the technology evolves, so should the operational procedures. Lastly, your organizational security programs should properly integrate CTI programs. How much do you consume CTI? Do you have it in a daily basis? Do you update your CTI once a week or once a month? If so, your program should be structured in a way that the delivery and the consumption of CTI supports your requirements. So that ends my presentation, and thank you and good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Major Carlos, for taking us through the Web 3.0 concept of cyber threat intelligence.